an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 3, Episode 4. Josh's ex-girlfriend is crazy. In this episode, we get the long-awaited She Cray episode. I mean, this is really another level. And honestly, in some ways, Rebecca accomplishes some things here that I wish I had at other points in my life, even though I know I would have regretted them. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you to Megan for commissioning this episode and commissioning the voyeur for it so that everybody could hang out with us while we watched. Owen came and hung out with me for that one. Later on today, at 7 my time, 8 Eastern time, I'm going to be doing the voyeur for the next episode. So that'll be interesting. I'm excited about it. You guys, this episode, I said on the live watch, I have not seen Swim Fan, so there's a lot of references, I think, in this that I didn't get, but that doesn't mean that it didn't work, because you still knew, more than likely, what was going on there. There's just a lot of horror movie elements, a lot of revenge elements, and often horror movie, like revenge movies turn into horror movies a little bit. And I just really, I think that probably a lot of us have been in a situation where, because what Rebecca says at the end of the episode when she finally gets to be face to face with Josh at the carnival is, you couldn't even give me the decency of like an apology and talking to me and answering any of my messages. I did this to get you to pay attention to me. And while I think it's easy to hear that and be very dismissive of like, oh, she just wants attention, I really urge anybody who was feeling that way to be like, no, but she deserves that attention though. This is not somebody who's like wanting something for nothing. She invested an enormous amount of energy in the relationship she was in. He proposed to her. They had a wedding. She's not being entitled. She's not asking for more than she's due. And this dude disappeared and never contacted her about it at all. And honestly, I hate for her the way this ends with him saying, you know, never contact me again, never come near me or my family again, as much as it's totally understandable that he would feel that way. I mean, I don't blame Josh for that specific reaction to this at all, because she's sneaking into his house and hanging stuffed animals from nooses in his closet. If a dude was doing this to a woman, we would be like, you need to call the police and go stay somewhere else. Like, this is the kind of thing that it sounds like the prelude to a murder. However, setting aside what she's doing here because desperate times, she has every right to expect a fucking conversation. And the fact that she goes so over the top with her behavior that he gets a perfect excuse to not give her that and make it still look as if he's being the reasonable one frustrates the shit out of me. This is one of those times where I know, again, I said in the intro, I know that I would be really regretful of doing some of the things that she did here. But I have definitely been embroiled in relationships, probably sometimes is too strong a word, but I would get involved with a guy and it felt like it was going somewhere. And then the dude would ghost, or he would just start being weird, and he would never want to actually have a conversation about what happened there. And there were times where I wanted to do this exact sort of thing. Just like, just make them feel shitty. Just make them, be aware of me constantly. Because I was just like, well, obviously, you're too much of a goddamned coward to sit down and talk to me like an adult. So if you want to play games, let's play a fucking game then. And you aren't ready for that either. But again, when people talk about taking the high road in relationships, that can be very easily weaponized, don't get me wrong, where it turns into this culture of like forgiving people for abusing you why should you? You don't have to forgive anybody. People say, oh, forgive them because it's healing to yourself. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe you don't get to decide what's healing for anybody, and mind your business. So I don't like to employ that kind of language too often. But there is something to be said for if you behave in a more dignified way, if you move on with your life and continue to live your best, they are much more likely to see you and regret their own mistakes. This that she does is confirming all of Josh's worst fears about who she is. He walks away from this relationship feeling sheer relief. There is no regret in him at all. And I, for one, want everybody who has ever been in a relationship with me and lost me to regret it until they die. I want them to think always, I can't believe that I didn't get that figured out. I can't believe I didn't work that relationship out. Look at how great she's doing. Look at how funny she still is. Look at how awesome. And I can't believe that I let her get away from me. That's what I want from everybody I've been with. And in order to accomplish that, you have to live your own life. That's it. You live your own life and you do your best. And you can't even live your own life and do your best to make them feel that way, because there's a thing that happens where people can sense that's what you're doing. You have to genuinely let go. But the thing is, if you've genuinely let go, then you don't care if they still want you anymore. So it's a kind of one of those things where it's like people say how you'll find love once you stop looking. Yeah, great, thank you. That's fucking useless. What good is that? Shut up. And it's true, but it's not advice. You know, it's not something that you can like follow through on. And I wish to God that we got to see Rebecca really, truly living her best life, and Josh getting to see from the outside how well she's doing. And maybe that's going to be something that happens eventually in the show, but it takes so much growth to get to a point where you can do that. And it takes so much distance from somebody to get the perspective that you need to sort of move forward, that I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, because Rebecca has a lot of shit to work on. I mean, what I really want at the start of next episode is to see her at her therapist's office again. But the way this one ends, it sounds like her mom is stepping in. And I don't know if that means that Rebecca's going back to New York or what she's doing. It sounds like New York, but I don't know. And I could understand in a lot of ways why she'd want to do that. Like, for me, during my divorce, I moved back in with my mother because I didn't have any place else to go. It was not something that I did because I felt comforted by being with my mom. She did not live like in the area that I grew up really. So it wasn't like I was going back to some place that felt familiar where I had other friends. Rebecca doesn't seem to have that sort of safety net either. It sounds to me, like she's going back to her mother for the same sort of reasons I did, which is just she doesn't feel like she has anywhere else to go. And for me, when I was in Philadelphia, I didn't really have a lot of personal close friends in Philly. I had friends of friends. I had one close friend who I had known since high school, and I knew that we'd be friends no matter where I went. But there was nothing holding me there. And Rebecca does have something holding her there. She has some close friends that she's made. I'm saying all of this about Philly because Rashawn and I weren't super close at that time. Rashawn and I got really close, like, pretty much after the divorce began to proceed, and then once we got involved with the podcast. So she wasn't a reason to stay in Philadelphia either. And I think that Rebecca's in this position where she's thinking she doesn't have a reason to stay because she feels that she's burned all of her bridges. I think, believes that what she said to her friends is unforgivable and that none of them will be able to move past that and be friends with her ever again. And the thing is, I wouldn't be soups angry at her friends if they really did feel like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that shit to me. I really don't want to be around you anymore. I wouldn't be that mad about it. I would want better from them, but she purposefully went in for the fucking throat on everybody, which was the hardest scene to watch ever. That said, throughout this episode, we see every single one of the people that she came for admitting that she had a point. They all seem to realize that as much as she was like way too harsh, trying to be hurtful, she wasn't wrong. She was just mean, which isn't necessarily the same thing. And this really, in particular, reminded me of a fight that I got in with my friend Nicole, who is going to be coming to my wedding. We are friends again. But Nicole and I were both going through a tough time in our marriages. And she wound up leaving her husband before I left Brendan. And I was still coping with what I could do to leave him because I didn't have a steady job. I didn't have a car. I was not equipped to move out of that situation in the way that she was. And I wasn't making an effort to get myself into a place that would give me those tools, which she noticed. And we got in this fight where we each went really, really hard for each other. And it was all via text, which is part of what's so funny. And I think that happens a lot. People don't say shit in like face to face. Like a lot of us wind up having our big conversations via text because it's a combination of, I think, genuine cowardice of not wanting to have this conversation face to face. And also, there's a feeling of control to it where you can start to type something, reread it, be like, ooh, that's not really right. Delete it, do it over again. And there's something about having the receipts yourself on what the other person said that feels sort of like safe to a lot of us, that we can share this with somebody else. And the two of us, she really got in my face about the fact that I hadn't left him yet, even though I was clearly unhappy, even though I was talking to another guy. And I got in her face about how judgmental she was at the fact that I was working from home when she clearly hated her job, had been working at it for years expecting something to change, and never made the slightest effort to move out of that job, despite having a lot of opportunities to do so, and then doing nothing but bitching and moaning about it for years and years and years. And we got in this fight. We stopped talking for probably like 6 months. It was right before I actually left Brendan. And she and I didn't speak again until I moved to Texas. I had her blocked on my phone so that if she texted me, I didn't even get it. Just totally cut her out. And then one day I was down here. I don't remember what happened that made me think of her. But all of a sudden I was like, that bitch was right. And I went and found her number and I unblocked her and I texted her and I was like, so, hey, I've been thinking about you and you were right. And I moved out and we're divorcing and I'm in Texas now with the guy that I was talking to. And she texted me back immediately. I'm talking like bubbles popped up after I sent my first text. And she said, oh my God, I was like just about to write this message sometime today. I was thinking that you were right. And I needed to tell you that you were right. And this is what happens, man. Like, it's so tough when you are friends with somebody and you love them and you want to be supportive of them and you don't want to like feed into their worst fears about themselves, or you don't want to like make things harder for them when you know that on some level they are already aware. You don't want to sound like somebody who's simply watching and judging all the time. But you also can't fake that you don't have an opinion on things that are happening in their life. And when you are friends with certain types of people, you'll see them making the same mistakes over and over and over and being genuinely surprised when things don't change. And it's like, well, bitch, what do you think is going to happen when you do that same thing 6 times in a row? So I think that, and for me, that was like one of my first experiences with having a really like knockdown, drag out fight with a friend and then just getting over it, realizing we each were like kind of right. And maybe we didn't use the best words to express ourselves, but we were right, and moving on. And I think maybe that's going to be Rebecca's experience eventually, is that she's going to realize like when you're really friends with people, when it's a genuine friendship, you get over that stuff. But when you are younger, when you haven't had mature friendships before, friendships that are only dependent on the circumstances of being in a certain class together or rooming together or, you know, being in the same circle of friends by accident, that's not solid enough to keep you together after a fight. Usually you can sort of go your separate ways and you're like, well, I mean, it sucks, but what can you do? When you have the kinds of friends that she has been beginning to develop here, people who know the worst parts of her at this point, that is when you begin to see what a real friend is, who is genuinely there. Because that's when people say friends through thick and thin, and we think of that as like during good times in your life and bad times in your life. But that's not necessarily what that means. Good times in your life, it makes it sound like, oh, when you're healthy and you've got money and everything, but are your friends still going to be by your side when you're sick or you're broke or whatever? But thin can mean thin between the two of you. You know, it can mean, are they going to stay your friend even when things aren't great? And make it to the other end of that issue. Make it through to the other side of whatever the obstacle is that you guys ran into together. And there are times where maybe you shouldn't stay friends. Maybe something happened and it really is genuinely, this person's toxic and I'm just finally realizing that. But I think that we know the difference when it's happening a lot of the time. There's a feeling in our gut, but that when you're continuing to talk to somebody that you know is kind of bad for you, you feel a little sick. There's like a gut reaction that you have where you feel comforted at the fact that this person is talking to you again on one level. But there's also kind of a grossness that goes with that. And you know, this isn't good for me, but it's familiar and I don't want this to change. So I'm going to keep doing this thing that's not good for me. Versus, I feel lighter now. We came out on the other side of this. I feel such relief. I see things in a very different way than I saw it initially. My perspective has clearly shifted in a dramatic way. And I think they also see things differently. Very, very separate experience. So anyway, guys, the beginning of this episode, I mean, I said while I was watching it with Owen, how incredibly hard this was, because she's about to be carried out by Nathaniel. And we've got all of her friends. We've got Paula. We've got Valencia. We've got Heather. We've got Dylan, Dwayne, Daryl. There we go. Every time, guys. I'll never remember his name on the first try. I don't think that's ever going to happen. They are all here to have kind of an intervention. It's not super well organized, but there's not really a good way to do that considering what she's about to do. And they want to talk to her about what happened and assure her that they are here for her. And by talk about what happened, I'm talking about her past and the fact that she burned down a guy's house. So what Rebecca does, it's awful, you guys. It's so awful. I'm just like cringing and like contracting into myself. First, Nathaniel refuses to keep carrying her outside, which turns into a moment of Rebecca looking at him and accusing of him of being part of this whole conspiracy. Which, the moment where she begins to say, "Oh wow, you too," I knew what was going to happen, because there's not a good way to do this. This is always, if you have a group of friends and one person is behaving in a way in which everybody else sort of agrees we need to address, there is not a good way to approach that one person without it feeling like they're being ganged up on. Because low-key, they are being ganged up on. That is what's happening. That's the problem. That is exactly correct. But we have this idea of being ganged up on as being defined as, we are all against you. You're the enemy. We are your enemy. It doesn't have to be like that, but that's how she's hearing it. That's how she sees it. And so once she decides that this is a us versus you situation, she goes in hard. So she starts first of all in with Paula. Paula's saying it's not an intervention, it's a convention of loved ones. And she says, "No, it's not. I know it's not, because I saw Josh give you those papers." And Paula says he's worried about you. And she says, "He's not worried about me. I saw you with him. I listened to your messages. I heard Father Bra's voicemail. I went to his office and I saw you conspiring with Josh." God, what are you, like, best friends with Josh now? He's your bestie now? He's worried about me. Is that it? I see you aren't here to help me. You're here to, like, put me away and get me out of your lives. You want me to just shut up and calm down and that I shouldn't think about Josh. Well, you know what? I'm done. I'm not falling for this fake intervention convention. You can't put me away without my consent. And this is when she tries to get him to pick her up. And he won't do it. And Valencia comes forward and says, "What Paula told us is upsetting. We're here to talk to you about it because it's upsetting." And this is the first one out of the group that she really lays into. And she says, "Upsetting is forcing your dream wedding on someone else because no one wants to actually marry you." And Valencia's face just sort of goes blank. And she says, "Wow, that's mean." And I love Rachel Bloom's performance in this scene, because she goes at people and immediately you see she feels bad about it. She isn't backing down. She's not taking back anything she said, but you can see guilt. Her conscience pricks her every time, but she's still doing it. And this is the kind of thing that it's a combination of things. I mean, Heather's response here is, it's okay, she didn't mean it. She's just projecting her feelings of insecurity and upset onto you because she feels trapped. Which I think it's part of that. I also think when you are afraid, as Rebecca clearly is in this scene, that they might be trying to put her away. And I think that's a genuine fear that she has right now. It sounds dramatic. And we know that's not something they are allowed to do. But the idea of putting her away is very symbolic, right? This is just her thinking, you guys want me out of your life. She says that as well. What she's doing is pushing them away so they don't want her in their life because she made a decision of her own that caused them to feel that way. Rather than, oh, they found out something about me and who I am as a person, and that is not something they want in their life. She's going to try and have some control over how that happened. So she's lashing out to purposefully alienate them in order to get them to back off from her and her friendship with them. And it's a kind of thing that it's so frustrating to watch her do it, because you know what she's doing. You're watching it. You know exactly. She's trying to hurt them because she's hurt, because she wants them to get out of her business. And she's trying to give them like a taste of their own medicine in a way. So this is when she goes in on Heather. She says something about her being a community college student and how pathetic she is, that you stayed in school and were so desperate that they had to literally kick you out. You're a fraud. And Heather sits there for a second just looking like, oh my God. And later on, again, note the fact that Heather is an elevated human being from all of us in some ways. She's like, no, she made some really good points and I just have to figure out a direction for my life to go because I just can't like identify as a student anymore. That's not a way to live. And then here comes Daryl. He needs to go to the bathroom. And Rebecca says, and this one's like so much worse in its way because he didn't even try to say anything to her. He's just interrupting and getting her attention on him in a bad moment. And she says, Daryl, what is wrong with you? Were you kicked in the head by a horse? It is laughable that you're my boss. I wish you hadn't said anything because it's so easy to take you down. Josh doesn't want to have a baby with you. Read the tea leaves because they're not tea leaves. It's a big neon sign that says no baby. And he gets really red in the face. And again, she looks sad and guilty for having said that. And Paula, you're not thinking straight. Take a deep breath. And she says, you know what? I'm nothing compared to you, Paula. You know about your ringleader, how out of her mind she is, or haven't you told them? Haven't you told them about the hidden cameras, the tracking devices, fake car accident? You know what? If I'm crazy, you made me crazier because you made me do terrible things because your life is broken and boring. And when Paula says, come on, Cookie, she says, don't call me Cookie. I hate that name. I hate it. It's like you think I'm your daughter or something, but I'm not. Stop treating me like I'm your daughter. It's pathetic. Why don't you go home to your real family for a change? You guys, oh, I hated it so much. I really, really did. And I was kind of surprised, to be honest, that Paula's come to Jesus moment was about not only her surveillance thing, which it turns out she's injected all of them with a tracker. Oh, God. But also about her being inattentive to her family. Because part of my enjoyment of Paula is the fact that she isn't a great mom. She's not on top of things. She just sort of lets her kids get away with the bare minimum and puts her hands up and is just like, whatever, they're alive, aren't they? And it's weird because that's part of her charm to me and what I love about her. But then when I really stop and think about it, I'm like, okay, maybe that is a valid thing for them to like talk about. Because her kids are like heading in the direction of accidentally setting a forest fire. Not by a gender reveal party necessarily, but something of that nature. Them fucking around with something in the woods. I 100% see her children being like responsible due to overall negligence, hers and theirs, for some major disaster. But I just didn't really expect that to be up for criticism, because it seems like that show doesn't want to do the like how to be a perfect mom thing or criticize women for choices like that. And I respected that. You know, I liked that about how they were like, yeah, we're going to depict a mom who's like not awesome and it's fine. But on the other hand, I do like that they're like, look, we aren't being super judgy about it or anything, but we aren't going to pretend you're great at it either. We're going to hold you accountable for the fact that you just let your kids eat straight up mustard for lunch and you just kind of don't really give a shit. And we do need to talk about it. So I thought that that was like a good balance to bring. And again, after she says this, she looks around at everybody and Nathaniel is looking at her with an odd expression. I can't tell how Nathaniel feels because it's not until later that he gets the full information about how she burnt somebody's house down. At this time, he's still sort of on her side in a very real way. I don't know about later whether or not he still is or not. Like, it's clearly a shock to find out what she did. But that isn't really, like, it being a shock and him being like, oh my God, that's not okay, doesn't necessarily mean that he's not interested in her at all anymore. Lord knows plenty of us had found out upsetting things about somebody that we were into that you'd have thought would have put us off that person, and it didn't. So I wonder where he's going to end up. But I do want to note that when she goes in on Daryl specifically, he looks really bummed about that. And part of me thinks it's because he thought a lot of the same things about Daryl that she's saying out loud right now. And hearing her say it, it's different to hear somebody say things that you were thinking out loud where people can hear. We all have an internal monologue that we edit. My internal monologue can be incredibly judgmental and super critical of myself, of every single person around me. I am aware of that. I know how critical I am. And y'all know how critical I am out loud. Just imagine what it's like inside my head when what you hear is the filtered stuff. That's me saying things after toning them down. So if my internal monologue came out unfiltered from someone else's mouth in a heated moment, it would be hard to hear. On the other hand, Nathaniel enjoys the fact that she's sort of aloof and not really available to him. And I couldn't help but think maybe he would like her even better after laying into everybody. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. But I don't really know enough about him yet. And about what he thinks of Rebecca. And she sure fucking should not be getting involved with him at this point. So, but she's clearly not somebody who's like strong enough to resist that when it's available. So I want him to pull back, but I also still want him to be interested. I want both. I like having her options open. So, yeah, at this point, she bails, and we see later that she is staying at a youth hostel. And she has this Dutch roommate at the hostel, and they're talking about this actress from the movie Swim Fan, Erica Christensen. Swim Fan is not a movie I've ever seen. I went and looked up the synopsis after watching this episode, and it sounds very like basic Fatal Attraction shit. Basically a dude who has a girlfriend already, and he's a high school student who's like working on a scholarship, and everything looks good in his life. He makes the mistake of hooking up with the wrong chick who gets very obsessive and begins to ruin his life systematically when he rejects her. And it's, you know, one of those like find out the root of why she is so obsessed with you kind of things, while she is setting him up to look like he's taking steroids so he gets kicked off a swim team, like all this kind of stuff. And this gives Rebecca an idea, because he says something about how Erica Christensen just kicks ass in that movie, and she says she's so strong and brave. I know she's technically the villain and a murderer, but she's treated so unfairly. And she says that because he says, maybe you should drown him in the deep end. And she says, maybe I should, Jarl. Maybe I should, Jarl. That's exactly what I should do. And it sounds like she's saying, I'm going to go murder Josh. But instead, what we get is probably one of the funniest sequences of this show. First of all, we get the intro to the movie from Swim Fan, but it's Swim Chan, which is just great. And the credits for it, we have credits at the beginning here, and then we have credits at the end. And the sign for West Covina, written by Josh Chan, because he's responsible for all this. Directed by Rebecca Bunch, as she's singing Scary Sexy Lady, Angry Angry Sexy Lady, Angry Like a Witch. Music by Rebecca Bunch. Edited by Rebecca Bunch. Costumes by whoever does Rihanna, because OMG. Executive producer, Rebecca Bunch. Casting director, guess who? And I love wearing high heels and a short skirt made of murder. Director of photography, the guy who did Fatal Attraction. A trench coat made of pain. She's walking down an alleyway. High heels made of daggers and eyes made of daggers too. It's just so good. It's so good. I love it so much. And so then we have the scene. It's a foggy yet totally clear night, because that's how these always go. We need the fog for the light effect, but we can't have the fog because that really like messes up with the camera and everything. So let's not do that. Not too hard. And we see Josh sitting at the dinner table with his parents, and Rebecca pops into the frame giving us the thumbs up, looking very mischievous. And Josh is talking with his parents about her, about, you know, other people's kids and what they're doing, one of whom is an actual escort. And Josh says something to them about how he's going to go and he got his job back, and that he thinks he's going to ask for a raise because he should have done that a while ago, to which his dad is like, wow, you're going to go get the job that you dropped overnight with no warning and ask for a raise? Really? And Josh, when he says that, he's like, good for you. And Josh doesn't hear the sarcasm. Is just like, thanks. I love Josh Chan's parents. I really do. These two are just so like I would watch a spin-off show that's just them living their lives. I really would. So Rebecca, we see her like standing just outside in an area where she should be visible. That's one of those things that always happens in horror movies. Somebody will be standing clearly visible. If anybody even has the bare minimum of peripheral vision, they should be able to see somebody is there, and yet they don't. One of those like, all right, I'll let you get away with it because I understand that this is a movie, but like if you don't see them, you really need to not be driving either. Like that's dangerous. So, and what happens is the first like moment of, oh God, what just happened, is her just letting a branch smack across the windows. And Josh jumps and is like, oh, that's so weird. I could have sworn I saw, but I guess it was nothing. So then he goes to his room and Rebecca has called him on the private line for the weird little like boob phone that he has under his bed from high school. I don't think I've ever seen this boob phone in the wild. You know what? I'm going to look at this right now. Boob corded phone. Now I got lips. Did you mean bi-corded phone? No, I sure didn't. Maybe it would be bikini. I think it's a bikini, right? But I love the fact that he still has this private line. His parents are still paying for the private line, even though here it is. I found it. Oh my God. It is so stupid looking. Lord have mercy. You guys, it comes in pink and red. And the boobs are so much bigger than the like hip area that it's really upsetting, actually. I will say that I desperately want this lips corded phone though. That is excellent. And I have not wanted to get a corded phone in my life since like high school, but this is just a really, really good looking phone. So I'm going to put this in the chat so that you guys can all see how great this is. I don't have a phone line, so there's no point, but it's really quite good. So she does that and then just like heavy breathing, and eventually, there's this like, you know, noise that brings him outside. He's looking around and we see one of the, like, again, guys, best moments. She hangs up the phone. We see her run real quickly past the window. And when she runs past, the camera cuts to Josh's face for a second. And then back outside. And she is shimmying sideways past the house. I don't know what this is that she's doing. Because she's shimmying sideways, but also holding her phone out with the screen on. And I'm not entirely sure why, like, what it is she's doing. Is it supposed to be like, oh, I was the one calling you? I don't know. But it's hilarious, and I laughed so hard at that moment, I swear to God. He comes outside, is looking all around. The fucking swing is swinging, and he's all freaked out by it. He turns back around, and all of a sudden she like comes darting out and gives the swing a smack, and it begins to move even faster. And then we cut to her laughing as she's like covered in this camouflage, this like bush camo. And we kind of get brought back down to earth by the sounds of her friends looking for her. It really, I had forgotten how close she was to the, like, everybody else, that she's in this neighborhood. So we're in 2 groups. Well, we're in 3. Heather's her own group for the time being until Hector hooks up with her, literally. But first we've got Paula and Valencia. And this is when Valencia sort of like asks Paula about what Rebecca said. and Paula has to admit that she has done some weird tracking stuff and assures Valencia not to worry because the battery in the tracker in her shoulder went dead. And when Valencia mentions that she's going to get that shit removed, Paula's like, you could, or you could just get the battery replaced, because let me tell you, if you ever get human trafficked, you'll be really glad that that's there. And I was like, oh my God, Paula, you need to stop. But it's another moment of her being like, oh God, as much as she was like really unnecessarily mean, she did have a point. And oh God, I do enjoy too Valencia and Paula getting a conversation, just the two of them, because there is so much that isn't resolved there. You know, when I liked that Paula admits when we became friends, it was kind of weird because before you and Josh broke up, Rebecca and I were on a full-on sabotage mission. I tracked you. I hacked your stuff. I blackmailed some people in your life for information. And she's like, I'm not proud of it. I just wanted Rebecca's love story to work out. I'm sorry. But, we're friends. I mean, and I like Valencia saying, I thought you guys were my friends and you were manipulating me the whole time. And she says, we were, but then we weren't. I am as surprised as you that you and I are friends. You were literally the girl I hated in high school. To which Valencia looks gratified. But I am your friend now, and I love you, and Rebecca is your friend, and she loves you. And female friendships are very strange, and I just stop complaining because we have to help Rebecca now, even if you think she deserves a yank on the pony. So yeah, I think that this was a smart move, like having this about face where Valencia had been the enemy, but now they're friends, without ever dealing with the really shady, fucked up shit that Paula did. I mean, you could have gotten away with it and I would have let you, but I'm glad that that's not what they didn't do. Or I'm glad that's not what they did. I want Valencia to not be the fool who has no idea how much everybody used to hate her. I want Valencia to be part of this friendship with all the information, to know what it was like before, that they are sorry. I want them to, because Valencia, while she was insufferable in her way, she didn't deserve to be handled and manipulated the way that they did. And I think it was for the best in the end, because she and Josh were not good together, but that wasn't their decision to make. And so, and you guys know that I have been like mildly pro Valencia from the beginning of the show. So I was just sort of pleased at the fact that this happened. And yeah, this is when the deal with the tracker comes up as well. So then we go to the scene with White Josh, Hector, and Daryl. And Hector, he's one of those characters that I just still can't quite get a handle on. Him and Heather hooking up, I'm kind of like, I think I had sort of wondered if that might happen a while back. And it is sort of nice how the show is treating it as not really that big a deal. It's just sort of like, well, I need somewhere to stay. I don't want to be here. And I would like a distraction as well, because shit has been upsetting lately. And he's pretty cute. And we're both healthy and young, and why not? Meanwhile, though, there's this conversation that's not happening very loudly between White Josh and Daryl. And Hector wants to get away so bad. He wants to just let them have this talk without him, and Josh keeps reeling him back in because he doesn't want to talk about this with Daryl. And finally, at the end of the episode, they have a real conversation, but it's very short. in bed about it. It's tough because when it comes down to it, when you have this sort of thing where you really want something and your partner doesn't, you really have to decide if you want the hypothetical thing more than you want your partner. And that's not an easy decision to make, because it's the kind of thing, for me, I haven't really run into anything like this. Every guy that I've been with, we've been pretty much on the same page not wanting children. And for me, that's really one of the only deal breakers in that regard that I can think of, other than like, you know, political ideals or anything like that. And I haven't run into that either. So I don't really know what it would be like to leave somebody because of something like this. It's the sort of thing that, for me, in my gut, it doesn't make sense, because I just don't, children have just never been a priority. It has never been something I have been, whenever I think about the concept of having children for more than like 4 seconds, my whole body contracts. It just sounds so terrible in every way. And so for me, it's just such a non-issue. And it's such a massive commitment, you know. It's the kind of thing that it's far beyond getting married. It's far beyond buying a home together. It's you are committed now to another person's whole life, because otherwise they will literally die if you don't take care of them for about 20 years. And that kind of thing with a partner that you're not really, that you haven't been with all that long. When we really look at how long Daryl and White Josh have been together, what has it been? It's less than a year for sure. I don't feel like that's the kind of decision you make right now. I don't think, even if you really think you want children and they don't, that within a year is a reasonable time frame to feel, okay, we are both very set in our positions. Give it more time. Explore this person more. Learn more about them. Maybe your mind will change. Maybe their mind will change. But the way the episode ends, it feels like they're both sort of sitting back and like, well, if we both want fundamentally different things in this regard, where does that leave us? And they don't really seem to know. And, you know, for my mind, Daryl's got a kid already. And I just don't really like, it's just the idea of kids is such a foreign, like, wanting that. I have so much trouble relating to it, that when you already have one and yet you want another one in a whole separate relationship also, that just to me sounds just like you're just asking for so much complication in your life, you know? And like, they are in bed together by the end of this episode. Does that mean that they've moved in together? I'm assuming they must have moved in together. I think they have, right? Because I feel like I remember them looking at furniture and stuff together in a catalog or something. But I don't know. I really, for my selfish reasons, don't want them to have a kid, because I don't care about babies in a storyline almost ever. It's really hard for me to give a shit. So I don't really want that thrown into the mix. And I really like the two of them together. I ship it, as y'all know. So I don't want them to split up over this. But at the same time, I don't really want Daryl to be the one to compromise again. I feel like Daryl is seen a little bit as like the more pushover of the two. And I feel like it would be kind of amazing to see Daryl really take a stand and be like, you know what? I really like you. I have been having a great time with you, but this is something that is kind of non-negotiable for me. And as much as you're a super hottie, I'm gonna have to move on from this. That would be kind of empowering for him. I don't know. So then we have the major scene in which, and we have like a couple of smaller scenes where Josh is he's asking for his raise. His boss is like, dude, no. And then also is like, oh, and I got an anonymous tip that you're stealing, and Josh gets suspended. And when he looks in his locker, there's a note from Rebecca asking him, where is Lourdes? I hope that she's safe. And it turns out that she has taken Lourdes to the carnival. And there's this wonderful series of scenes, like straight out of this type of movie, of him like at the carnival trying to find the two of them, looking around and being, thwarted by crowds and brides and yada, yada, yada. And finally we have the confrontation where Rebecca is getting her the attention that she wanted, but not in a real way, because of Lourdes, because of this whole thing that she set up. He says, I've had it with you. Do you hear me? This is enough. You don't mess with my family. He's pushing her backwards right to the edge of this like pretty big hole. And she says, you get to mess with my life, though. You've still not apologized or explained about what happened between us. I've called you 37 times, texted you 84 times, and nothing. You couldn't even do me the common courtesy of getting back to me. And he says, so you kidnapped my mother? Do you understand how crazy that is? You're crazy. And finally, he has her like backed up at the edge of this thing, and she almost falls, and he grabs her and keeps her from falling. And there's this moment where he's watching her and he almost lets her fall. But then he grabs her and she points and she says, Lourdes is right over there. I would never hurt your mother. And she's getting a caramel apple. And she says, I was just trying to get your attention. You haven't gotten back to me. I'm sorry. I know I got carried away, but I was trying to get you to notice me. So now that we're here, let's just have a conversation. Can we please talk to each other like humans? I mean, God, we've been in each other's lives so long. There's so much between us. You can't just throw it away like it's nothing. And this is when he says, if you ever get near me or anyone I care about ever again, I'm calling the police. And as he walks away, she says, Josh, you can't do this. I don't know who I am if you're not in my life anymore. And he turns around and just says, leave me alone. And she is standing there looking like she might jump into that pit herself. And we have this moment with Paula, like having a dream that Rebecca came to her and said, I need help, and waking up. And she says to her husband, I feel like Rebecca's on the edge of doing something really terrible and hitting rock bottom. And this is when we cut to the bar and Rebecca is getting a drink and looks up, and she had been talking to the bartender about Greg, and she gets butt dialed by Greg. She thinks he has just somehow known that she needed him and picks up very excitedly, but it turns out he wasn't actually calling her. And she kind of has a mini meltdown. And then she looks over and she sees Greg's dad sitting there. And when she goes over to talk to him, his dad tells her that Greg met a girl at college and is madly in love. And she tries to get some information out of him about who this girl is, and he won't give it to her. And he tells her something about how, because she says everybody gets to be happy except me. got it. And she says, I'm not worried about you. You're a smart broad. You've got a nice figure. You'll be fine. And she says, sometimes I really think I'm not going to be fine. And he says, you're going to bounce right back from what you're going through. Trust me. And when she says, I thought you hated me and thought I was crazy, he says, aren't we all? And puts his hand on hers. And the next thing we know, she is falling through the door of his bedroom, making out with him. And I will tell you guys, I saw him at the end of the bar, and both me and Owen went, oh my God, no, at the same time, because we immediately had the same thought. When Paula said rock bottom, fucking an ex's dad, I mean, it doesn't get a lot more rock bottom than that, kids. Like, it just doesn't. But I then was like, no, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't have her do that. No. But they do. And Rebecca wakes up and sees him, and she has sobered up, but it's still like the middle of the night. And she starts doing her walk of shame home. And we get this amazing song from Josh Groban singing about how life isn't really a movie. And you want things to be wrapped up neatly, but life doesn't work that way. As Paula's calling her, trying to get a hold of her. And everybody is like working on their things. We've got Josh writing his resume, trying to maybe get a new job because he's been suspended from that one. We've got Nathaniel, who is, we had seen him earlier trying to like find out where Rebecca was, and he had roped George into helping him, even though George was on a date. And Nathaniel here is hugging his stuffed alligator. We've got Daryl and White Josh talking about the baby thing. And Rebecca continues walking home, and we get the amazing end credits with the reappearance of her Danish roommate. Jarl the Danish guy, who's the best boy. Worst boy, Josh Chan. Special effects, my imagination. Verbal fight choreography by years of mistreatment. Stills photographer, Chan family security camera. Stand-in, Broom Daryl. Big carnival pit by lazy construction workers. Oh, God. And this is when Rebecca says, I have officially ruined everything. I've burned every bridge and alienated everybody. And we had seen Paula earlier getting on the phone to her mom. And as Rebecca is sitting there, her phone begins to ring. And it is her mother. And she picks up and she says, hey, Mom, in this like defeated sort of weary. And she says, yep, I hear ya. And then, yeah, okay, you're absolutely right. I give up. I'm going to come home. And that is the end of the episode. And I do not know what to expect. Because I want to say I don't think she'll go home. But she might. I mean, after something like this, why not? Might be good for her in a way. I don't know. I really don't. So, guys, come hang out with me and watch the next episode with me in an hour after this next episode, which I'm covering for Black Flame. And I can't wait to find out what happens next. I'm very interested. So thank you all again so much, and we will be seeing you shortly. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.